1962. A year etched in fire and blood, but also in hope and freedom. For the people of Algeria, it was the year the world changed forever. After more than 130 years under French rule and a brutal 8-year war of independence, a nation was reborn. This is the story of how Algeria broke free. To understand 1962, we have to go back to 1830. That's when France first invaded Algiers, marking the beginning of a long and often violent colonial period. Over the next century, French settlers, known as Pieds Noirs, poured into the country. They seized the best land, controlled the economy, and dominated the political landscape. For the native Algerian population, this meant second-class citizenship in their own homeland. Their culture was suppressed, their language marginalized, and their opportunities limited. For decades, resistance simmered. There were political movements, peaceful protests, and calls for reform. But France considered Algeria not just a colony, but an integral part of France itself, Algérie française. This refusal to even consider independence created a pressure cooker environment. By the mid-20th century, a new generation of Algerians decided that diplomacy had failed. The only path left, they believed, was armed struggle. On November 1, 1954, a day that would become known as Red Toussaint or All Saints' Day, the newly formed National Liberation Front, or FLN, launched a series of coordinated attacks across Algeria. This was the start of the Algerian War, a conflict that would tear both nations apart. The FLN's goal was simple and absolute: complete independence. The war was incredibly brutal. The FLN employed guerrilla tactics, targeting military installations, colonial infrastructure, and individuals they deemed collaborators. The French army responded with overwhelming force. They deployed 500,000 soldiers, implementing a strategy of quadrillage, dividing the country into a grid for systematic pacification. This involved mass arrests, resettlement of rural populations into camps to cut off support for the rebels, and the widespread use of torture, which became a dark stain on the conflict. One of the most infamous chapters was the Battle of Algiers in 1957. The FLN launched a campaign of urban bombings, targeting cafés and public spaces frequented by European settlers. The French response was to send in elite paratroopers under General Jacques Massu, who were given free rein to break the FLN network in the city. They succeeded, but their methods, particularly systematic torture, were exposed and horrified many back in mainland France, deepening the divisions in French society over the war. The conflict wasn't just fought in the cities and mountains of Algeria. It caused a massive political crisis in France itself. The instability and cost of the war, both in lives and resources, brought down the French Fourth Republic. In 1958, facing the threat of a military coup from generals in Algiers who feared the government would abandon them, France turned to its wartime hero, Charles de Gaulle. He was brought back to power, founding the Fifth Republic, with many hoping he would keep Algeria French. Initially, de Gaulle's rhetoric seemed to support this. He famously visited Algeria and declared, "Je vous ai compris, I have understood you," a statement everyone interpreted in their own way. The Pieds Noirs and the army believed he was on their side. But de Gaulle was a pragmatist. He saw that the tide of history was turning against colonialism. The war was unwinnable without unacceptable moral and financial costs, and it was isolating France on the international stage. By September 1959, de Gaulle shocked the hardliners by publicly speaking about self-determination for Algeria. This was a seismic shift. It was a clear signal that independence was now on the table. For the French army and the Pieds Noirs who had fought to keep Algeria French, this was the ultimate betrayal. It led to desperate and violent reactions. A secret, far-right paramilitary group, the OAS, or Secret Army Organization, was formed. Composed of French military personnel and settlers, the OAS launched a terrifying campaign of bombings and assassinations against both Algerians and French officials, hoping to derail any move towards peace. Despite the OAS's terror campaign, negotiations between the French government and the FLN began. The talks were long and difficult, held in the town of Avion-les-Bains. Key issues included the status of the European minority, control over the Sahara and its newly discovered oil reserves, and the terms of a ceasefire. The OAS tried everything to sabotage the process, plunging cities like Algiers and Oran into chaos with a scorched earth policy. Their violence was indiscriminate and brutal, a last, desperate gasp of a dying colonial order. Finally, on March 18, 1962, the Avion Accords were signed. The agreement called for an immediate ceasefire and laid out the path to independence. It included guarantees for the rights of the remaining French settlers, though fear and violence would soon make those guarantees meaningless. The accords were put to a referendum in France in April, where over 90% of voters approved of the plan. Then came the final step. On July 1, 1962, a referendum on independence was held in Algeria itself. The result was a foregone conclusion. An overwhelming 99.72% of Algerians voted yes. 2 days later, on July 3, Charles de Gaulle officially recognized Algeria's independence. And on July 5, 132 years to the day after the French first arrived in Algiers, independence was formally declared. The scenes in the streets were ecstatic. After 132 years of subjugation and 8 years of horrific war, Algeria was finally free. Crowds poured into the streets, waving the green and white flag of their new nation. There was singing, dancing, and tears of joy. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. But independence came at a staggering cost. It's estimated that hundreds of thousands of Algerians lost their lives during the war. The French military suffered around 25,000 dead. And the civilian casualties were immense. In the months surrounding independence, a mass exodus occurred. Fearing for their future, almost 1 million Pieds Noirs fled Algeria for France, a country many had never even seen. It was a traumatic displacement that would reshape French society. At the same time, tens of thousands of Harkis, Algerians who had fought alongside the French army, were abandoned. Seen as traitors by the new regime, many were massacred in horrific reprisals. The legacy of 1962 is complex and enduring. For Algeria, it was the birth of a nation. A powerful symbol of anti-colonial resistance that inspired movements across the globe. But the post-independence years were difficult, as the FLN established a one-party state and struggled with economic development and political stability. For France, the war left deep scars on the national psyche, forcing a painful reckoning with its colonial past that continues to this day. The story of Algeria's independence is a powerful reminder that freedom is never given, it is won. It's a story of sacrifice, of resilience, and of a people's unbreakable will to determine their own destiny. 1962 was not just the end of French rule, it was the beginning of Algeria's journey. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our world. See you next time.